Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Oh Shoot. We have a guest on the podcast today, an in-house guest, a built-in guest, the one, the only, your favorite, Charlie.
What's going on, guys? How you doing?
So Charlie's back for another episode. He is joining us for our advice column episode this week. So he's the handler of submissions.
I was going to say, almost kind of like a moderator in a sense. I've got all of the forms up, and I'm going to be scrolling through the responses as we go. So
yeah. So Charlie is the voice of the listeners today. So thank you for joining us.
do you know what they call, what's the word for when like professors fill in at colleges like semi-routinely? Is that called adjunct?
Oh, I don't know. Like a substitute teacher?
Yeah, but it's like they do it kind of routinely. I think it's like an adjunct professor.
Okay. And that's...
I'm not calling myself a professor.
But you're a podcaster.
But I'm saying like I'm an adjunct podcaster with you.
Okay. Yeah, you can take that role. That's fine.
Cool.
So, what did I want to say before we got started? Oh, my presets launched. At this point, it'll be like almost a week, like 6 days ago. So very, very exciting. The satin summer presets. What do you think of the presets, Charlie?
Actually, I think this is one of my favorite preset packs that has launched, or that you have developed and put together. We've had conversations in the past.
He basically said my other ones are ugly and this one's his favorite.
Not at all. Just in terms of if I were to be routinely editing myself, I think that there are a couple of just kind of like visual things that would differ or be different between Cassidy and myself, just as far as preference is concerned.
Like if you were your own photographer and you chose your own editing style personally, you think the satin summer presets are closest to what you would want? Yeah,
and I think it has to do with kind of like the greens in the in the podcast, excuse me, in the presets.
Yeah.
Just some of the like the really natural, vibrant greens and kind of retaining a very just organic color and true look to kind of the nature, the natural kind of setting. I think that is kind of the side of the spectrum that my own editing would fall into if I were to take time developing my own editing style.
So you want the presets? Do you want me to send them to you?
That would be great.
He doesn't have them yet on his computer. I have them on mine, but usually I send him presets.
Send me the zip file or whatever they're
Yeah, he still hasn't got them yet. Yeah, so my presets came out, which is so very exciting. And then honestly, this whole week, like when I have a launch like that, especially if it's a really big launch like presets, like I got a really great response, and it, you know, I took a little break this week. I was like, I'm just going to chill, made a few videos, but I'm just hanging out. So yeah, it was a good launch.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of like prep and kind of extracurricular things that she's usually concerned about when she's got these different things that she's launching. So it kind of consumes a good portion of her time when you get to that point.
Yeah. So anyway, let's get into the advice, unless you have stuff you want to say, but...
No, we've got some cool stuff coming up in the next couple of weeks, but we're just hanging out for the moment. So
This is true. Okay, so let's get into it.
Yeah, so I have the responses in front of me, but just ask for your patience as I might need to be scrolling through as Cassidy is like responding to different things. I'm going to do my best to make it smooth transitions from one piece to the next, but some of these questions that you guys were asking for advice on are a little bit lengthy, so I'm going to do my best to try to get the gist of things without saying every single word. So,
well, I like when, like, read the submission word for word. I like when the submissions give a little bit of context, so it's easier to kind of give insight. You know what I mean?
Yeah, to hear where the person's coming from.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, some of them I will have to cut down a little bit, but yeah, we'll do our best to keep it in the words that you guys presented them in. So here's our first one. Hi, Cassidy. Love all your podcasts. It always feels like I'm talking to a friend. I'd love your advice on some business finances. When it comes to finances in your business, how do you figure out how to pay yourself each month? And then how do you figure out how much money is appropriate for like education things, presets? I'm trying to buy satin summer Avi and styled shoots. I know some of this stuff is tax breaks, but I want to financially gain too. So what do you recommend percentage wise on how to budget? Thank you so much. We didn't plan that, by the way, after talking about the presets.
Yeah, the sun summer plug. Okay, that's a great question. The person asked, how do you pay yourself? How do you figure out how to do that? And then how do you also figure out like spending? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, the main thing, if you are full-time in photography, you basically have to figure out what is your required paycheck that you need let's do it on a month basis. Like, how much money is your rent or mortgage? How much do you pay in bills in general? Then you need to figure out, okay, how much money do I need for food, whatever. So you figure out your personal budget, and then also figure out, okay, do I want a little bit of extra for savings or whatever? And once you have, let's say you create like an ideal number that you want every month, then you're going to go and look in your business and say, okay, is it reasonable for me to pay myself $5,000 a month? Like, is that something that my business brings in? Which 5 times 12 is what?
You'd kind of be looking around 70 grand.
Okay. So like, look to see, did my business make, I mean, it'd have to be more than 70,000 because you also pay taxes as well. So it would have to be like, after taxes, has my business made 70,000?
It's 60,000. No, I did the math in my head.
60,000. Yeah. Well, yeah. You guys, we're not mathematicians over here. Like, come on.
Trying to be quick.
I'm a photographer. I'm not. I'm no
we
math
got calculators
expert
for that stuff. Come on.
So that's kind of how you figure out how much to pay yourself. How you pay yourself, literally, you just make the transfer every month from your business bank account to your personal. And then in your QuickBooks, you would mark it as like a personal withdrawal or whatever. If you are a single person LLC, all of that money, basically like your personal income and your business income is all linked together. So like you transferring money from your business to your personal doesn't like make any difference. Basically you're just keeping track. That transfer doesn't mean that you're going to get like, taxed double or anything like that. So that's how you pay yourself. And then as far as like budgeting for other things, I mean, what I do is I do percentages of my income that comes in. And I think I've talked about this on the podcast before, but in my business bank account, let's say I get paid, this is a high number, but just for example's sake, let's say I get paid $10,000 for a wedding. Of that $10,000, I budget, at this point in time, I budget 40% for taxes, which is crazy, but I got screwed over last year. So now I'm doing 40% for taxes. Okay. So that leaves 60% of that 10,000. So $6,000 is left. Then I'm going to do, I think usually I do around 40% as well towards my, like what I pay myself. So I literally have a checking account that is just for my personal payments that I pay myself out of. So, that's 80%. And then we've got $2,000 left over. I usually split and do 10% of that goes to my expenses. So random subscriptions or whatever. So $1,000 would go towards that. And then the extra 1,000 I put into another savings account called Profit. And that's kind of like my wiggle room money. If I want to buy presets or if I want to, I don't know, if I want to save for something personally, I can even take that money from there and use it for like something personal. So yeah, I just have an extra 10% for wiggle room. So that's kind of how I do it. And I think it works well. And it's good to kind of save within your business bank account. Like I find it's easier when the money's in my business account because I feel like sometimes that money I don't always have access to, which is good for me. Like I don't want to feel like I have access to all of my business money. I have to transfer it over to my personal if I want to actually use it. So yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's good practice to hear some of those percentages and almost like close your eyes to the extra money that you might be putting in certain spots, because if you get ahead of yourself and you're dipping into your tax savings or whatever have you, you're really kind of playing with fire there when it comes to either quarterly or when you get to that next kind of big checkpoint, you might have to pony up quite a bit of cash that you were already kind of messing around with previously. So you might not have it on hand. So yeah, it can get pretty crazy pretty quick. But yeah, I think that's some good advice.
Thank you. Thank you.
So this next one here. Am I the only one that feels like editing becomes repetitive and boring after a while of editing a session? I feel like I need to look at something new and get my eyes off the photos for a certain amount of time. Is this normal? If you experience this, what do you do?
Okay, so it's definitely normal. I think a lot of people deal with like editing fatigue, or like you look at photos for so long that you don't even like know if your edit is good anymore, because it's like, if it's like the same lighting over and over again, it can be like, oh my gosh, I don't even know what I'm doing. So it's I would say it's common to feel like that. And honestly, it's a good thing to close your editing, look at something else, honestly, look away from a screen for a little bit and come back to it, because it gives you like fresh eyes and allows you to see, okay, actually I was editing way too cold, or I was editing way too overexposed or whatever. So yeah, I would say it's normal. And the way to to deal with that is just to walk away from the screen for a little bit, honestly. So yeah.
Is there anything else as far as like maybe within your editing session, would you ever recommend like even switching gears and trying to work on something else for a second to kind of get a different perspective and then revisit it and kind of go back and forth? Or do you always kind of just cut cold turkey for a little bit? Or what do you think?
I think it's good to look away from a screen. So if you have something else you can work on that's not screen related, which maybe you don't, maybe you just put away gear or something. I don't know. But I mean, my advice is always to look away from a screen, because if you're still looking at the screen and then you go back to the edit, I feel like your eyes are still kind of like bugging out from just looking at screens. So yeah.
I gotcha. Well, I think you offered some good insight to that. So let's move on to this next one. This one has to deal with second shooting and some of the kind of hoops you have to jump through as a second shooter. I've been second shooting for a while now, and I have a lot of second shooter jobs coming up. I'm starting to get inquiries for my own weddings, but I'm very grateful for those inquiries. I'm second shooting a lot of luxury weddings, but the inquiries I'm getting are not for luxury weddings, which is what I want to be shooting. The photographers that I second shoot for do not allow their seconds to post the photos they take on social media, which I completely understand. Sometimes it can be discouraging when I can't use the photos that I've taken and I'm not getting inquiries for the types of weddings that I really want to be shooting. I've done a few styled shoots, but that was a little disappointed with the results. Any advice on how to get more into the luxury wedding market when I can't use the photos from the second shooting I've been doing?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I do believe I have an episode that I did with a girl named Madison, and she is a luxury wedding photographer. So if you literally are like, if you go to the podcast, I think you can search like episode names. And I think if you just type in Madison or luxury, her episode will pop up. She gave a lot of good insight on how to get into the market and all of that. It really is hard when you can't use the photos. And so honestly, you do have to kind of ask yourself, like, why am I taking these second shooting gigs? Because if it is to grow your portfolio, you can't use those photos. Well, is that second shooting gig really benefiting you then? I mean, that's something I know, like, it's fun to shoot luxury weddings, but if you literally can never use the photos, you're just doing it for the paycheck. I mean, yeah, it's good experience. I guess like when you second shoot, you really just can't have any expectations, and that's a really hard place to be in. I guess like you can't even, they said they couldn't even use the photos on their website or anything. Okay, cool.
Well, yeah, they just said on socials, but I don't think they necessarily specified as far as on their own website. But I would assume that basically all of their stills belong to the other photographer. They don't get any usage. So
something that's hard for beginner photographers to grasp is the idea of like them not getting their dream client right when they first start. Like, it's hard when you see other people getting your dream clients and you're like, why can't I book that too? And at the end of the day, it really boils down to experience and connections. And if you don't have as much experience as these people that you're second shooting for, and you don't have the connections that they have, you're not going to get those inquiries. Like, and you're not even able to show those photos in your portfolio. Like, people book what they can picture themselves in. So how do you get into the luxury market? I do think years of experience helps, having connections helps, and being able to show luxury photos in your portfolio is probably going to be the biggest thing. So because what you're shooting right now, you can't really put into your portfolio, you're going to have to find a way to make luxury images. You mentioned a few style shoots. That's a good way of doing things, but also you can create your own style shoots. If you're disappointed with the style shoot results, the best thing you can do is to do it yourself. So that would be my advice. Like I said, go listen to Madison's episode because she shared a lot of good advice on breaking into the luxury market. So
I think that piece of talking about trying to just have a little bit of a reality check of, while it may be fun to be second shooting these luxury weddings,
yeah,
you are also taking up a big portion of your schedule. And if you don't get the usage from it, then you really need to think about how practical is it for you to continue to be using a lot of your time second shooting with that. So I think that's a good thing to think about.
But it is also good to make those connections with those photographers.
Well, yeah,
too.
and I was going to say, I think thinking like maybe trying to rework your mindset when you are second shooting in those luxury settings is to think more about leveraging those times for networking and maybe just even like, exposure with the venues that you're at and different things, just trying to talk to people. Because if you already know up front that you're not going to be able to use that in your portfolio as far as the images are concerned, still do a great job with shooting, obviously, and try to do a good job with that. But just be there to really talk to people and try to make as many connections as possible.
Even like the vendors there, if there's like luxury florists or like planners, those would be great people to get in with, make relationships with. And if you're feeling really ballsy, you could ask the photographer. If you've shot a few weddings with a photographer, maybe ask them if you could negotiate that contract and see if you could only use the photos on your website, or if you could post the photos but not tag anyone, something like that. I wonder if you'd be able to negotiate as well. I don't really know. Like, I wouldn't like get anyone's hopes up, but I think that could be something to try.
Yeah, with time.
Never hurts to ask.
So here's the next one. What do you do if you are having to turn down bookings and you're considering an associate? Do you stick with one associate, hire out different ones? How do you test to make sure they're good for you? Or do you just avoid this altogether? I have one hired for a wedding in August, and I'm sending a second shooter along as well, but I'm so nervous, I'm not even sure it's worth it for the future. Also, how do you communicate with associates, excuse me, I keep saying that wrong, and seconds, do you put them in a contact with the client? Do you put the associate in contact with the client?
Yeah, good question. So this person is basically just asking like, okay, they're starting to try to use associates. How do you make sure they're a good fit altogether? So this is kind of the hard thing about the associate market. I personally am not the biggest fan of it. At the end of the day, I don't love that my business and how my business is perceived is based on someone else. And that's kind of like, it's a little bit scary to allow the opportunity for someone else to taint your reputation. So I'm always a little bit wary of using associates, and I've used them in the past. I think the key is going to be finding a good associate. And in my opinion, a good associate is someone who loves to shoot weddings, but doesn't love like actually running the business themselves, like doing the editing and all that. They just really love the shooting side of it. Maybe they even have another job. I've seen a lot of full-time associates who literally have another job and they just associate shoot because it's just easy money that you can make, but you don't have to do really any work other than shooting. So in my head, those are going to be the ideal people the people that really enjoy associate shooting, but not so much like the business side of things. Maybe they don't even have their own business, or maybe they're trying to start a business or whatever. Those are going to be the best people to have as associates. How do you know if they're a good fit? I mean, obviously seeing their portfolio, maybe even having them assist you or second shoot with you a couple of times. Those would be great people to consider for associate shooters. It's helpful to have at least more than one associate. So if one associate is busy, you can ask the other. It depends on how organized you are, if it really is worth it. Because I've found that associate weddings are way more work on the back end and like extremely like almost like emotionally like they're more, because it's like you don't know how it's gonna go. I don't know. So I don't know. That's just what I found with associates. But and then they said, do you put them in contact with the client? So when I was using associates, I don't really use them anymore, but I was doing all the communication. I was doing all the planning. I would do one call with the client and the associate just so they could like meet and whatever. And, maybe go over timeline and stuff, just so like, when your associate shows up on the wedding day, they don't feel completely blindsided. They have no idea who the client is or anything. So, and a lot of people I've heard just like don't put their associate in contact with the client, because like it's kind of your job to do the planning and all of that and the communication. So yeah, I would say that's my answer.
Yeah, we've had a couple conversations with some photographers that run their businesses based on a lot of associates, and it was a pretty mind-blowing conversation to talk with them, just how widespread they were. But I think also this individual had someone that was helping him do a lot of the logistics and the administrative as far as keeping people coordinated. It just was it was crazy to hear the amount of coordination, because then this individual is still shooting, he said like 70 or 80 weddings himself in a year. And I could not believe. And then he said like his company covers like 200 weddings in a year with associates. So it was just really crazy to hear that type of an approach to the photography industry as far as weddings are concerned. But yeah, it's almost a completely different animal at that point when you get to that level of coordination and stuff.
Yeah. I feel like sometimes with associates, it spreads you too thin and you're not able to give people the full experience that you normally do. If you are booking an associate because you're also booked that day, that limits your ability to give attention to the other couple. So yeah, you kind of have to be careful with it. Spreading yourself too thin without any help is not good. If you are able to, expand your team and also get help in the areas you need help with, let's say organization or whatever, communication, then that's fine. But I just want to put like a warning out there that sometimes it can lead to just you spreading yourself too thin, and then something has to be sacrificed at that point. And most likely it's going to be the associate couple that hits the back burner. So
yeah. And the hard thing about that was with the specific person we were talking to, they were mentioning how their own personal experience was becoming something that they were like building a really big reputation of how they personally interacted with their clients on the day of. And because of how big their associate program had become, he was really concerned about the idea of how many different clients that were getting associates were kind of expressing the concern of like, hey, we were really reaching out to get the experience of having you as our photographer and the kind of atmosphere that he creates. And the fact that was kind of becoming limited in his ability to kind of give that to everybody, that was something that he was really wrestling with, even though he had successfully created this kind of big machine that was just pumping out wedding coverage all over the place. So just something to kind of keep in mind.
The only thing worse than taking too many photos while you're shooting is getting home and then having to edit all of them. Here are some ways to speed up your editing workflow without losing any quality in your work. Today, I want to introduce Aftershoot Edits 2.0. You can experience the most consistent edits straight out of Aftershoot. One of my favorite things about Aftershoot is their upgraded white balance and exposure AI models. Even if your lighting varies during your session and you have a lot of drastic changes, Aftershoot's able to instantly fix any blown out highlights, murky shadows, and overall, this feature allows you to have balanced photos no matter what your lighting conditions were. Another way to speed up your editing workflow is by using AI masking in Aftershoot Edits 2.0. This feature allows you to selectively edit your images through masking. With AI masking, Aftershoot can automatically select your subjects and adjust them to really make them pop in your image. Another great way to save time while you're editing is to use Aftershoot's advanced cropping and straightening. This tool allows you to customize and select any aspect ratio, and it even automatically crops in your photos so that the focus is more on your subject. It also can automatically straighten your photo, which is going to save you so much time in the long run. Say goodbye to spending way too much time editing your photos and use Aftershoot Edits 2.0. Aftershoot has an exclusive offer for all Oh Shoot listeners, so go to the link in the description of this episode to find out more. Thank you guys so much for watching, and now back to the show.
I'm going to be living in Australia for the next 6 months, and I am worried about how I'm going to build a clientele and get my name known in an area I am new to. Any tips on getting attention in a new city where I don't know anyone?
I mean, you're only there for 6 months, so I don't know how much of a reputation and clientele you can build, because if you're not there long term, it's like, I don't know, because like you can't really shoot weddings. Maybe you can shoot sessions. Okay, so let's just say you're just wanting to shoot sessions or something. I mean, my biggest piece of advice to anyone that moves to a new place is always like creating community, creating connections. Easiest way to do that is to just do things locally. So like reaching out to local small businesses, seeing if anyone needs photos, linking up with other photographers in the area, attending style shoots. Maybe you follow some bigger photographers, see if they host any events or anything. Sometimes there's like marketing events or like what is that called? Networking stuff. So maybe like look for some stuff like that. And honestly, like you find clients, in my opinion, you find clients within like your friend circle and within your community to start out. Like that's the easiest way to do it. It's just people you know. So ask yourself, how can I make friends? Truly, like you got to make friends. You got to talk to people, meet people. I mean, you could also create a presence on social media as well, but I think that is a little bit harder to do. And in 6 months, I don't know if it necessarily would give you the end result that you want. I think doing more in-person word of mouth stuff might be easiest. And if there's vendors or stuff you want to reach out to, maybe you host your own little style shoot. If you already have a portfolio, reach out to some local vendors, offer to pay them, which is a big thing. Sometimes like vendors don't want to do stuff, but they don't get paid for it. So, those are all things that you can do. It's definitely hard moving to a place literally with no connections period, but I've seen people do it. And maybe if you really are trying to get bookings, run a couple Google ads or something. Join some Facebook groups. I don't know. Yeah,
it'd be kind of an interesting venture to kind of relocate for just a short period of time. I think about some of those photographers on social media who will do sessions with people that they meet on the streets.
Right,
stuff
like
that
stranger
too.
sessions.
Yeah, which I know some of those are planted and like planned out ahead of time.
But some of them aren't. Some of them are actually strangers. Yeah, it depends on how extroverted you are. If you are okay with rejection, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, you have to put yourself out there when you're in a pretty specific situation like that. This next one is from someone who's in a pretty like beginning stage. So we're going to kind of go through this and I want you to answer some other things. I booked my first wedding. I'm a small photographer. I shoot on a Canon R6. Looking for tips on the photographing and editing process at an event like this. There's no do-overs. How do you minimize risk? Also, what is your favorite lens to use at a wedding?
How do you minimize risk? Well, I mean, you double check and triple check that everything is working 5 times. You double check that your batteries are charged. And in fact, you bring a charger with you just in case they're not. Because the risk at a wedding is that the photos get ruined somehow. You either lose the photos, they're out of focus, which you can't really come back from that. Maybe they're overexposed or something. So your settings, it's really a technical game when it comes to risk, right? So number one, losing your photos. How can you minimize that risk? Well, make sure you're shooting on 2 SD cards. Make sure that your batteries are charged. Make sure you have a backup camera, things like that. Another risk is things go out of focus. Okay, so make sure you know what focus mode you need to use. Make sure that you are checking to see if your photos hit focus. And then another one would be like settings wise, like your photos are too underexposed, overexposed. Shooting in RAW is a big thing. If you can shoot in RAW, you can save a lot from an underexposed photo. So it's good to shoot in RAW to minimize that risk. And I mean, besides that, I think a big thing that helps me when I feel like maybe the photos aren't going to turn out as good, I find that happens to me when I'm like rushing a lot. You know what I mean? Like when I am just like, go, I'm trying to go from post to post to post. Whereas if I slow down for a minute and just breathe and stop like freaking out while I'm shooting, that really helps me kind of like reground and get a better image. So yeah, I'd say that would be my advice. And then the other part was which lens?
Yeah, your favorite lens to shoot during a wedding day?
So different lenses for different moments, because I think there are moments where I can be really close to my couple, and then there are moments where I can't be right next to my couple. So, I mean, my go-tos would be like a 70 to 200 for speeches and for the ceremony stuff where like you got to get up close and personal, but you can't be right next to them. And then I would say like a 35 or some sort of like wider lens for portraits and whatnot, a 50 or something, something that maybe can get a little bit of a lower aperture. That's going to be my go-to for portraits and like moments that I can control how close I can be to my couple. So
that's great. A moment ago when you were talking about in the preparation for trying to minimize risk on the day of, you mentioned talking about shooting in RAW. Yeah. And there was one of these submissions was just asking about shooting in RAW versus JPEG. And I just kind of smoothed over it because that's something that can generally be seen as something that is very basic and beginner, but could you kind of just delve into that a little bit more? You talked about being able to save images because you're shooting in RAW versus something else. Right. Could you just kind of dive into that a little bit more and explain to me what the difference would be shooting in RAW versus JPEG? Yeah,
so basically a RAW file has more, like it's literally a bigger file. There's more color information. Like the actual photo has more color information. So if you're shooting in JPEG, let's say you paste a preset on there, that preset's going to be pretty intense. Whereas on a RAW photo, you put the same preset on it, it's going to be a lot more subtle. And that's because a RAW image just is a bigger image and it holds more color information within like the shadows specifically. So, or like shadows or dark areas. It just like, so for example, if you were to shoot a JPEG photo and it was pitch black, you raise that exposure up, you're going to get like crazy noise. The photo is basically going to be unusable. Whereas with a RAW image, because it's a bigger file and it holds more color information, if you were to take that pitch black photo and raise up the exposure, you actually are going to be able to save a lot of that image. It's going to brighten easier. So when you're, I always recommend shooting in RAW, obviously, but after kind of explaining that, I also always shoot a tad bit underexposed as well, because no matter if you're shooting RAW or JPEG, having a photo that's too overexposed, once your highlights hit a certain point of being too bright, you cannot lower them and get that detail back. For example, if you like shoot a snowball or something and it's like just a bright white snowball and you shoot it too high, if you were to bring, and like, let's say there's like you have a carrot nose on the snowball. This is so niche. Let's say you have a carrot nose on the snowball, but like it's so overexposed. You can't bring the exposure down when it's overexposed and still see that carrot nose. Whereas if you were to shoot underexposed, maybe you don't see the carrot nose in the underexposed photo, but if you were to bring up that exposure, oh, there's the carrot nose. Now you can see it. So you lose detail when you overexpose a raw or a JPEG photo. And that's all I'm going to say about that, because I don't know much else besides that. That's literally all I know about that.
Yeah, I think you explained it perfectly.
Okay.
That's I appreciate it. And we got to make sure that Frosty can be seen well. So.
Right. My Frosty the Snowman reference. It's the middle of summer.
So this next one is a pretty interesting scenario. I'm going to read through the kind of experience that this person had, and then they had a couple questions that followed up with it.
Okay, I'm ready.
So I did a short test shoot for a couple that was interested in booking me for a wedding later this year. To summarize, it was not paid for, but it's 5 minutes from where I stay, so I thought, screw it, it's content. They seemed really happy with their photos and the experience. I had met them at a wedding I did last year. And at the end of the shoot, we spoke about the venue they've chosen, and they had questions about how timelines usually work. I sent them a message 3 days after delivering the photos and said we can organize a video call if they're happy to book me for their wedding, and then I could explain my packages to them. They both responded saying thank you so much for the help / they appreciate it. So I'm unsure if it was that it was a polite way of saying no, they won't be booking me or not. I feel like I should send a follow-up message suggesting times for a call, but it would be really awkward if they meant they didn't want to book me. I also thought maybe they are still considering their options, so I'll just give them some time. I'm stuck.
Okay. So my first initial thought hearing that is doing a test shoot is not a good idea. So, you live and you learn. But I will say I've actually never heard of anyone doing that before. So that's my first thought. Second, you haven't even sent a follow-up email. So don't overthink it, because they haven't, until they say, no, we don't want to book you. Don't get in your head. It's really hard to read people's tones over email or text. So don't get in your head. If they're good people, they'll at least get back to you and let you know either way, especially because you went out of your way to do this test shoot. So yeah, I would say definitely send a follow-up email after a couple of days. Sometimes people literally read emails and then forget that they didn't respond. So give them the benefit of the doubt. Reply. And honestly, I maybe create a Calendly link or a Honeybook scheduler link where you could be like, hey, just wanted to follow up with you guys. If you want to hop on a call, here's a link. If I'm being for real though, I don't think you need to hop on another call. You already met with them in person. You did a test shoot with them. You talked with them about their venue. I don't think there's much else to talk about, to be honest. If you haven't sent over your prices, maybe that's something you can do, but I don't think there's much else to talk about. I think you should literally be like, hey, can you let me know? And I mean, you could even be like, I have someone else looking at this date, so I need to know, even though maybe you don't, that it'll create some urgency from them. I do want to just circle back to that free shoot thing. I do understand, okay, it's content. You need content. I get that. I do. But at the same time, I do think it devalues your services a little bit if you're going to offer, just literally free photos for anyone just to get a vibe for how you shoot and edit. It's I think they can get a vibe from just looking at your work. I don't think they need to be in the photos to understand how it works. I mean, hopping on a phone call for sure, so they can feel your vibe and see how you are personality wise.
Yeah,
but
to know you.
Yeah, I would say don't offer free shoots anymore. I've literally never heard of that. And I think that is someone trying to get free photos out of you, to be honest. And yeah, send the follow-up email, do what you got to do. Don't overthink it, because at the end of the day, you're a business, you're trying to get an answer from them. You've invested time. So yeah, don't overthink it. Seriously, just send the email. Even if it feels awkward, if they did mean to say no, they didn't straight up say no. So you can't assume that they don't want to work with you, and you just got to be persistent about it.
Yeah. When I saw the free shoot as a part of the client retention piece, that was pretty interesting. That's why I wanted to bring that one up.
Yeah. Honestly, you don't know. So now you know. And that's why we're here.
That's why we're
to
talking
let you
about
know.
it. That's what we're doing.
Okay.
This next one is another kind of longer scenario as well.
I kind of like the scenarios.
Yeah, honestly, it's pretty interesting to hear
Yeah.
where some of these people are coming from, and it gives us good context to their questions.
Yeah.
I had a client who booked me and my associate for photo and video the day before their wedding because their photographer canceled last minute.
Wait. Booked me and my associate
For photo and video the day before their wedding.
Because their photographer canceled
their previous photographer canceled.
Oh boy, okay. Got it.
We charged them very cheap amount, under $1,000 for both. Because we wanted them to have their day captured despite a tight budget, and we were only supposed to be there for 2 hours.
Oh, okay.
It had been raining that day, so our client is calling, freaking out to change the location for the bridal photos from the desert to somewhere else because they didn't want to get dirt on the dress. Understandable.
Yeah.
So we find a new location, everything works out, and we get the space for the ceremony. We get the space for the ceremony, and they had a religious event they wanted us to capture before the ceremony, and we were so down.
So down.
That's what they said.
Okay.
As time is going on, while we're capturing said event, we are now 30 minutes over the 2 hours they paid for, and the ceremony hadn't even started yet.
Oh.
We track down the groom and are trying to figure out when things are going to start, and he keeps ignoring us. The ceremony finally starts, and by the time it was done, we were an hour and a half over our time. Did I mention they haven't paid us at all yet? We ended up charging them an extra $100 each for the time they went over, and they weren't happy at all about it. Then their Venmo kept failing when they tried to pay us. They paid me my half, and they had it in cash, and made the videographer come to the groom's work for the following day to pick up the rest of the money. What would you do if a client went over the time they paid for?
Leave. I'm just kidding. No, but okay. A very wise DJ once told us that if you are in a scenario where your contract is ending, there's still more things to be captured, he told us, don't go up to the couple and be like, hey, my time is ending. I need to, like, I'm going to charge you more. And don't go to them and say that. Just capture what you had talked about and then invoice them after. Right. And just say, hey, it went long and this is how much you owe me for my hourly rate, whatever. Now, for me personally, and that's wise advice. However, I think when you are charging someone and you don't tell them, I don't love how that feels either. That to me, if I got a Venmo request the day after my wedding for my photographer being like, oh, I stayed 3 hours extra. Here's $1,000 invoice. I'd be like, excuse me? I'd want to know. So I feel like I create a decent relationship with my couples to where I feel comfortable going up to them. Obviously, I'm not going to go up to them in the middle of their first dance. I'm not going to go up to them at a bad time, but I'm still going to go up to either them or maybe a coordinator or a maid of honor or someone and just be like, hey, my time is ending in 30 minutes. It's always good to around the 30-minute mark be like, okay, my time is ending in 30 minutes. Just want to give you a heads up. Do you want me to stay beyond or whatever? So that's how I'm feeling about it. That's what I would do personally, because you were already giving these people a decent discount. And the ceremony hadn't even started yet. I don't know. There comes a point where it's in my contract. I have been here for 2 hours. That was in my contract. Are you going to pay me more? Otherwise, I'm going to leave. At the end of the day, you're a service. You're not a charity. You're not a person to be walked all over. You are there because that's your business and you are there to make money, right? So yeah, it kind of just is what it is. I mean, the ceremony hadn't even started yet, so it sounded like you guys had no choice. And then the client not being able to even Venmo you, like literally, what? Like, I don't know. It just sounds like that person didn't respect you really and just didn't respect you as a service and as a business, even though they utilized you beyond what they were contracted for. Like, they should have paid you. They did. It sounds like they did pay you, but they made it such a big hassle. And that's just not like a good person, like good people pay for the services that they use.
Yeah.
So.
I think it's kind of twofold here. Like if you think about the context of it, like I think you might have kind of stumbled across the reason as to why the previous photographer canceled the day before that wedding.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe they were like nightmare clients.
Yeah, they might have really just been in it for the budget and trying to just be budget shoppers and really didn't care about the individuals that they were working with, which is, I'm not trying to say the worst about people that I don't know at all, but if they were a nightmare on the day of and that previous photographer canceled, you might be seeing some of the results as to why that photographer kind of bailed on that situation.
Who's the real problem here?
I have no idea.
I don't know.
So this next one, I have been shooting for a bit now and recently purchased a new flash to accommodate. It has been great, but I have only been using manual settings. How do you use your settings? And what are some tips and tricks to use them in different lighting scenarios?
Okay, so I'm the TTL queen. I feel like everyone knows this, but TTL is basically auto mode for your flash. So I just pop my flash in auto mode. And I mean, the tips and tricks I have for flash are how to use TTL mode to your advantage. So like you can use direct flash, so pointing it directly at your subjects. If I do that, typically I have to crank my aperture decently high because it's going to be a really bright photo on my subjects. Like my ISO will be at like 100. My aperture is at like 5 or something. So you can do that. There's 2 other things I use with flash. I'll bounce it off the ceiling or bounce it off of a wall. A ceiling is more common because ceilings are white. With that, my settings are pretty much just like whatever they need to be properly exposed. I usually try to keep my aperture relatively lower because that's what I usually shoot. So maybe 2.8 and then my ISO just at whatever it needs to be. And then I'll do shutter drag at a wedding sometimes. And that is flash pointed directly forward in TTL mode. And then the thing that is going to change from normal direct flash is my shutter is really, really low, like 1/6 or something. And then my aperture is super high. My ISO is super low. And, I'll freeze my subject and then keeps my shutter open and I can kind of create light leaks throughout my photo. So those are the 3 ways that I use flash. I never use my flash any other way. I always shoot in TTL mode and everyone has their own preferences for flash. Like people do off-camera flash and whatnot, but I find I'm a low maintenance girly and that's just what works for me. If I'm looking for natural ambient light, if I can, if not, popping on my flash using TTL mode. Don't think twice about it.
Yeah, there are some really cool things that you can do with off-camera flash and being able to integrate it in a way that isn't like super not like encumbering to the day. Like it can be flexible and mobile and good to go using triggers and things like hot shoe triggers, but that's just not something that has really been a part of our repertoire of shooting. So
sometimes I feel like off-camera flash creates like a little, like the vibe feels more like a set.
Yeah.
And that to me, and it looks more like a set too in the end result. And that's not, I like my subjects to be moving around and I don't want to feel stuck in one place. And when you set up a light stand, I feel like it definitely holds you in one place. So it's just not really ever been the vibe that we're going for. But
yeah, you just have to kind of make up your own mind as to what style you're going for is kind of what I'm getting at with that. So
okay, let's do one more.
One more. Oh goodness.
I know. There's always so many submissions. I feel like I need to do 10 advice column episodes.
Yeah, maybe we'll have to revisit it. But I mean, this next one, a couple that are on the screen actually kind of play into the same exact theme. Okay. So maybe let me just read a couple of these all together and then you kind of address them how you see fit.
Okay.
So here's the first of kind of a pack. I recently started working full-time 9-to-5 job again, plus trying to do photography and build up my business so I can eventually do that full-time. I really need to stay at my current job for a while though. Any advice on how to balance both of these as well as still have a personal life without getting burnt out? I just feel like I'm headed towards burnout at times and just want to quit everything. So I really don't want to do that. Thank you. And then this next one is I'm struggling to get past the point of part-time income in my business. 25K-ish is kind of the number that they put as someone who doesn't do weddings as their main thing. And then actually, no, it'd be those two. Yeah.
Okay. So how do you also have a personal life with a full-time job and doing photography? Great question. So when you're doing a full-time job, it's going to be hard to also run a full-time business, right? So like doing all the marketing, all the editing, all the shooting that someone that doesn't have a full-time job does, you know, like you're not going to be able to take someone who is full-time in photography and do exactly what they're doing. Like there are not more than 24 hours in a day, you know, like it's just not possible unless you are able to find ways to outsource or minimize parts of that. So for example, outsourcing like your editing using an AI software like Aftershoot, something like that. That is a great way to kind of get some of your time back, but still be able to do everything, you know, like keep the editing in-house. You know what I mean? So that would be one example of how to have a life, would be something like that. Another thing is setting like a set schedule. So let's say on whatever nights that you are like, okay, like I don't really usually do anything on Wednesday nights. Okay, so we're going to say Wednesdays and Mondays. So Mondays and Wednesday nights are your evening work nights. You're going to do your editing. You're going to get back to emails. You're going to do client calls. You're going to, maybe you also do shoots those nights. So whatever it is, like those are going to be your nights, right? And then maybe you book 1 or 2 weddings for like in a month on the weekends. That's going to be your best way to avoid burnout, is by not every single night getting home and doing like a sprinkle of work here and there, by really just like figuring out, okay, Mondays and Wednesdays are going to be like my 12, 14 hour work days where like I work during the day and then I come home and I keep working. Cause that's going to allow you to then on Friday night, go hang out with your friends or go to a family dinner. You know what I mean? Like, so that's going to be a big thing. And then pair it with outsourcing things as well. That's going to be an investment that honestly you kind of have to make in your business. Like if you want to make sure, if your time is valuable to you, that's going to be the first thing that you just have to invest. Like that is so huge. And I think a lot of the times full-time photographers don't need to make that investment because they've got 40 hours a week, 40 hours plus, where they can do all of it and more because it's, you know, just them and like they don't have other things that they're really working on. So that would be my biggest advice. And then the other one was I'm struggling to get past the point of part-time income. Okay.
Yeah, in their business.
And they're not doing weddings. Okay, so this is something that I don't have a ton of experience in because I mainly do weddings. But if you're like just session based, you're gonna want to be like a very niche. Like I think of like someone like Preston Luke, who's a luxury senior photographer, just seniors. And he's created like this whole like senior rep program where like he is known for doing this and like he gets booked out because, you know, so many people are booking him to do senior photos. So that's kind of how you're going to have to make that work, is by being known for like this one type of session, truly, whether that's newborns, families, seniors, branding. Like I feel like a niche is so important when you are not doing weddings, because the more niched, the more specific you are, the more likely you are to be known for that one specific thing. Whereas if you're doing families and newborns and seniors, it's like you're just known for everything, but someone that's known for everything sometimes is known for nothing as well.
Yeah.
So that's what I have to say to that. I feel like that was kind of a mic drop moment for me.
No, yeah, I mean, those are some really good points. I mean, talking about, I think something that kind of like summarizes what you were talking about initially. You mentioned at times finding moments to work in and on your business rather than just working for your business, and trying to be really specific about. I just remember back to when you were in that transition of leaving the job that you were working full time for our college that we were at, and then trying to figure out how to implement more moments to work on your business rather than just scheduling out weddings or different shoots and then always being stuck editing and trying to deliver galleries to people. That was always just working for the business, but you weren't actually developing anything or finding moments to figure out how to do that outsourcing and save yourself times in different moments. So I think kind of visiting that idea and trying to give people points to think about stuff that they can figure out for outsourcing, save them time, and then remember to actually try to develop your business and not just be stuck always doing the work itself.
Yeah.
And then the other side of it too, like figuring out specialization and figuring out a way that you can continue to build value for yourself. So that way you can get to the point where you're charging more money for things that you're well known for and things that you are really good at.
Yeah.
So I think that those are some really good things to kind of wrap it up on for this moment. But we definitely have enough submissions that we could kind of revisit this at some point soon.
Yeah,
so
it's true. Thank you guys so much for listening to this week's episode. And Charlie, thank you for being on, facilitating the submissions. We'll see you next week for another episode. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, guys.